see you guys. Good to see
I see you.
Absolutely. So, and Carter had to adjust his schedule to be with us, the busy man, and thank you very much. So, without any, yeah, it's 3 p.m. Pacific. So, Joe Castillo, on to you.
Thank you very much, Francis. Judy, appreciate you. Carter, hello, welcome. Hopefully you guys are doing great out there. I want to remind everybody before we get started, the chat section is on fire today, and we would love for you to submit any questions you have for the guys in the chat section. Feel free to take it in a little different direction. You know, I'm a very curious person, but I can't be as curious as everybody out there. And so by all means, we want your participation with the guys. So we got Aaron and Carter. Let's talk a little bit about what is the product and what is the solution that you are creating here today. I understand it is a shock dyno. You're immediately talking to to a lot of the folks out there who race, who compete, who challenge themselves on a weekly basis. I will say, Carter, that your audio is a little lower than we need it to be, just because it's a little low. So try to turn up the audio as best as you can. There you go. Yeah. You might have to get closer.
Get closer. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Hold on. Whatever you just did.
We'll get a little bit closer. Does that sound better, Joe?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, Aaron sounds very clear and Carter sounds low, like he's off mic. Is there a microphone pointed like directly at Aaron or? Okay, well.
Yeah, I can talk louder. Does that sound good?
Well, okay, that sounds great, but I'm just, forgive me for troubleshooting. It's so funny that we just had an audio guy on and now we're having an audio issue. I'm sure people are chuckling about that. But, okay, which one of you is Carter? Raise your hand. Okay, Carter.
That's me.
Now I know. Carter, your audio sounds fantastic, while Aaron's sounds low and underwhelming. I wonder, is there something like pointed, the phone, something pointed directly at you? Because yours is coming in loud and clear, and if you're going to do the majority of the talking, everything's going to be fine. I just want to let you know about the situation.
You know what? I'm pretty good at talking. I'll do the majority of it anyway. So
excellent.
Do I still sound good?
Yes, no, that sounds
all right.
Good. And Aaron, when you jump in, just be loud.
All right. So yeah, the shock dyno that we're just demonstrating one right here. We've been in the dyno industry and in the market for right around 20 years, and been heavily involved in it for the last 15 years or so. We've had a multitude of different models and really kind of adapted the machine to the change in what the industry and the market's been looking for. What racers and industry and businesses are looking for right now is it's a lot different than it was 20 years ago. So you know, we've been doing seminars like this for close to 20 years, and it looks a lot different now than it did, just for that reason. So yeah, looking at the units we're going to talk about today and kind of the offering that we have and the options within them. That's what we're going to focus on today.
Exciting. You know, you've been in the business 20 years and it's changed. How so though? What are people looking for now that they weren't looking for 20 years ago with their shocks? And when we're talking shocks, are we talking a specific genre? Is this for off-road? Is it for competition? Narrow down some of the subject matter for us.
Right. Okay, Joe. Basically, when we look at the shock dyno, the offerings that we have a couple of different styles. We have an 8 horsepower model and we have a 3 horse. We have 2 different horsepower levels and really that's going to dictate for different markets. We really feel that we have a machine that fits into just about every single market available out there right now. And when you look at that, we really started out as primarily targeting the circle track market. Majority of our users were circle track racers. Dyno usage has been much more common in the short track, circle track market across the board. It's much more common among your pro racers all the way down to your weekend racers. And so it kind of started there, but we sell dynos from anywhere. We have equipment manufacturers across the world that use them as validation machines, all the way down to Saturday night racers that are using them to check their shocks to simply make sure that they don't have a bad shock for the weekend. A lot of people, such as myself, my company, we do about 1,000 shock rebuilds a year, and we need something to validate them. So the machines that we use a 3-horse model for that. And so small businesses, larger businesses, anybody that's trying to validate that measurement within the shock needs a shock dyno, and that need has come much higher within the last, say, 5 years. You've noticed with this product.
And so it has evolved dramatically, as has all motorsport and automotive. People have kind of gone, and everything, honestly, have gone off the deep end with their requirements. What's the origin story, though? I'd love to know that, Carter and Aaron. Like, how did you get into this? You've been doing it a long time. Seems like a very specified field and a specified knowledge. I know from drag racing that, you find all this horsepower, but if you can't get it to the track, well, what's the point? And shock technology has gone through the roof. Give me your origin story. How did you get into all of this?
Well, I can start out. Aaron can kind of add to it.
It's the most bizarre thing, Aaron. It's like you start to talk and it's like the microphone doesn't like you. It's the most bizarre thing because it goes down. Like, Carter is loud. Now, see, I could hear your chair. Do me a favor, Aaron, and I apologize to everybody out there, but as a sort of an audio guy, I got to test this. Aaron, get real close to the camera. Like, get close. Talk to me now. Okay, but now, Carter, I need you to talk.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, okay. You're a 9 out of 10, and Aaron is a 2 out of 10, and there's no reason why. I am just intrigued, and I can't begin to guess what the reasoning was. Aaron, I apologize in advance, but it's so bizarre. And what are you guys using to speak with us? Just an iPhone or a computer or a laptop?
We got a computer with a separate camera and mic. So
which way is that microphone pointed? Because I'm guessing it's a directional microphone. You guys want? Yeah. I really apologize for this, but you want to do a test? Switch spots.
Sure.
Yeah, and if we can hear Aaron all of a sudden, and we can't hear Carter.
Okay, can you hear me now, Joe?
Of course, there it is. I've solved the problem.
That's really what it was.
Okay, there it is.
So must be over there. We can switch spots. Nice to meet you, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Nice to meet you, Aaron. I apologize for the audio issues, but at least we got
no problem.
Settled out. Go continue with your presentation. Everybody out there, feel free to ask questions. These guys, they're warmed up.
I'm a drag racer as well, so you and I have something in common there. Carter is a circle track dirt racer. We're a weight measurement company by trade. So Intercomp's been in business for over 40 years, used by all forms of motorsports. We're known for our billet wireless scales. So 20 years ago, because we're a measurement company, we weigh everything from Airbus 380s to military deployments, industrial applications. We took that technology that we have in software development and put it into a shock dyno. We're already doing coilover raters, rating springs and things like that. So it was a natural fit. Carter works with us. He actually sells dynos and rebuilds shocks as well. He's a shock expert as well as a dyno expert. So we thought, what the heck, let's do a dyno seminar. So we also do these at PRI. That we'll have them next week. Carter will be doing those as well as he'll have dynos running live in our booth. So
excellent.
That's kind of the origin of it.
No, and I appreciate it. Now let's talk about the different models of machines that you have and explain the difference between like the 3 horsepower model, the 8 horsepower model, standard versus high speed, and why one would fit a certain person's necessity. And you have, just remember, you got to switch spots.
Switch spots.
All right, we'll switch spots.
It's the craziest thing, guys. I'm sorry, but you got a direct.
That's all right.
It only picks up that one spot.
Yeah,
it's definitely the most memorable of all of our seminars.
Well, we're glad to be that for you. So the biggest difference obviously is the horsepower and the power range
Evidently, we
of
need
them.
better audio.
Yeah, so we were much more focused on the camera aspect of it. So the difference obviously between the 3 and the 8 horsepower model is a power difference. Not every single market, including the majority of the short track market and some of the industrial market, doesn't really have a higher power and higher horsepower need within them. Obviously, with a higher horsepower need, you have that's attached to cost and size, and it can be it's not necessarily needed unless you need extremely high shaft velocity. So we're talking about shaft velocity. What I'm talking about is how fast of movements we see from this shock. So if I'm looking for, I have a shock that has extremely high forces, meaning it can be extremely difficult, and it creates a ton of force if you push it in or you pull it out. And you take that shock, and if I want to test that shock and have it, and I need to run it at a, sometimes it just has so much force that it needs more horsepower. It's going to need more horsepower to push or pull that shock at a given speed. If I want to run it at a high speed and simulate, like you were talking about, the truck market, trophy truck market, UTV market, power sports market, and such, I'm looking at high shaft velocities. Obviously, when you're talking about vehicles that fly through the air and then land, you're going to see a very high shaft velocity from the shocks, and they want to test that shaft velocity, and they want to test it at a and be able to have something capable of it. Sometimes they're going to need something with a higher horsepower to be able to push that. So we really designed the 8 horsepower machine with the power sports and the off-road market in mind. And our 3 horsepower model, we do offer it in 2 different series. It's going to be, there's a high speed model and we have a standard speed model. Typically for our short track racing and oval track, you are going to see very high forces from the shock. So when we push and pull on the shock, a lot of times we try to hold those cars in attitude, meaning if you watch a dirt late model race or you watch a pavement late model race, those cars are held stable. They're kind of held in the same attitude all the way around the track. And a lot of times when you're talking about where did the origins of this happen and kind of what's happening in the shock market, that's really driven what we've done with the machines is that the need for the shocks to hold those cars in attitude and the attitude that those cars have gained over the years and what has developed over time in those industries. The shocks are heavily relied on to hold those cars there, and we build them. And the shocks are valved extremely aggressively. And when we look at that with a 3 horse model, which is more than enough for that market, our standard speed, which is like something I would use in here. The majority of the shocks that we build in our facility here are going to be for the short track market. So we don't have to simulate very high shaft velocities, but we have to be able to pull higher forces. A standard speed model is going to be built for that. Now, if we look in other situations where I have a lot of road race customers, and in some cases, power sports customers that are trying to simulate that higher shaft velocity, our high speed model will simulate that. It can go as high as 55 inches a second and give you validation curves up to that range. So it's really what the racer and the builder or the manufacturer, what kind of information they're trying to gather. Sometimes within all forms of motorsports and with all setup and all sort of weights and measurements technology, we take and sometimes we can simulate exactly what's happening, and sometimes we just build stuff within parameters of just to try to duplicate something such as the manufacturer would do. A lot of times, just making sure that they're going to build given amount of shocks, and the shock is going to be the same every single time. It's used as a validation in that case.
Got it. Okay. At this point, we're about halfway through. I think it's important to give people out there your website and your contact information. No reason to hold that back till the very end, because there are a lot of people who already know that this is something that they could take advantage of, utilize to make either themselves better or for their own business if they're looking to offer this service for folks. So why don't you give us that information? And then I got a couple of questions for you. And also want to remind everybody out there, if you've got a question, put it in the chat section so I can hit these guys with it and see what they think about what you guys have got to say out there. But Carter, what is your main point of contact, and where can people get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, our website is esssuspension.com. And then you can present the Intercomp, Intercomp, where you're going to see the actual units on there, and all the other products that we offer at Intercomp is going to be intercompracing.com.
Got it. Intercompracing.com. Now, are professional teams the only ones, who's using these? Are you starting to see, like, I don't really like the term weekend warrior, but those folks who are not doing it for a living, are shock dynos becoming more popular with those folks?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you say, they're really, at this point in racing, what's made these machines so popular among amateur racers is that really probably nobody's a weekend warrior anymore. Racing has become high level across the board. And so when we talk about the evolution of where it's coming, where we started 20 years ago, where it is now, we have a major part of our market is amateur race teams trying to check out their shock packages, and we're seeing an increasing movement within the industry to keep information in-house. Race teams, it's so imperative, the partnerships that race teams make with their industry partners, chassis builders, engine builders, and so on. And really the purchase of a dyno and people getting their own dynos, it's the next step for a lot of teams. It doesn't necessarily, really what we see a lot of, and I see a lot of with my shock dyno customers, is I see a lot of people, we have a lot of people that they're not even going to they don't work on their own shocks. They don't necessarily buy them to tune on their own stuff, but they maybe have adjustables, or they just want it as a validation tool because the shocks have become such an imperative part of their racing program. So yes, at the inception of this, 20 years ago, yes, it was only professional teams and manufacturers that we would see looking at a dyno, and everybody was pretty reliant on everybody else for that information. And at this point, you see rigs at the track with dynos pretty readily anymore at the racetrack. And like I said, they may have somebody build their stuff, but they're still looking at, in the case of them, even if it's built, they want to be able to check it themselves. And if they do a little bit of tuning on it, they get them back from builders, they get them back from manufacturers. They want to check that work is really what's coming. That's how imperative the shock programs are. And I talk because my background is oval track racing, so I talk heavily in that arena. We sell a lot to the drag racing market too. Shocks in the drag racing market have become huge in the last, I'd say, 5-6 years, where you've seen, we'd see cars that have, $100,000 plus motors, and I kind of chuckle sometimes with Aaron, and they have $150 shocks on them, and I say, it's kind of, for a person like myself, it's kind of humorous, where in the last 5-6 years the drag racing market has stepped up to where there's a lot of 4-way adjustable stuff, and extremely high end equipment is getting put on those cars to make sure that they can plant that horsepower. And so when you see that raised price in the market on the shock absorber, that's where people start looking at it and saying, I have all this money wrapped up here. They've got knobs on them. I can, I don't really know what I'm doing. I need to get my own machine and just test it and try to keep as much of this in-house. If I get that edge, I need to be able to keep it.
No, that makes sense. And even, the idea of sending something away to someone who's going to do some magic to it and send it back and you put it on, like, that's just kind of an old world thought now. People want to know why things work and why they're doing what they're doing. And that's part of the fun of the whole experiment too. Like, you're doing these things because you want to be hands-on, not just put something on. We got some questions out there, guys. Dave has a question. Dave says, if you're running the same shocks, are you able to see comparative data for performance over time?
Absolutely. When you look at the machine, what you basically do, it's very imperative for us whenever we're working on shocks or somebody's using their own dyno. I always say you want to get the data on the shocks immediately. The way like you say, if they're coming back from somewhere freshened, if they're brand new, that initial data is extremely important. That's your comparative data. That's what it is when they're brand new. And then, like I say, every single race or every so often, every so many races, you're going to put them back on the dyno, and then you overlay the graphs. You take the graphs and you take that data, you overlay them over top of each other, and you see if there's any discrepancy and see if it's moved. If it hasn't moved, then I know I'm in good shape, at least with that. And a lot of times we look at racing is it's basically a chess match. When a car gets away from you and it's not performing like you want it to, a lot of times it's just about eliminating variables. And sometimes the dyno is going to show you that A, it's fine, or B, I have a problem here and I need to do something about that problem. So over time, and also it's very common, I see with dyno owners, they'll do endurance tests on their stuff, and they'll do some heat tests and just see what the performance looks like over time and kind of simulate a time of a race. I've seen that happen before, where they'll say, I wonder how hot this shock gets, or what happens if I get shock fade and so on. What does that look like? And to be honest, what we see with current day shocks, the performance of them is so much higher than what we dealt with to begin with. They'll see that they can get pretty hot, and you're not going to see a whole big difference. But they like to see that kind of comparative data.
Got it. Another question. When are we going to be able to run the shock and spring together? A forward-looking question. Is that possible?
I get that question a lot. The answer to that is, the reality is with the shock is what we're measuring here with a dyno is you're measuring what kind of force the shock puts out at a given velocity. And a spring doesn't change with velocity. It changes with static movement and with pressure. So the two at this point, we really have to correlate the two to each other, or, when we look at what a spring and a shock do separate things. And a shock controls what that spring is, how quickly that spring is going to wrap up, and in cases we're trying to control how quickly it extends. So, like I said, that question, I do get it a fair amount of, why don't we put the spring on the shock and see what it does? But if you really don't have any comparative data for it, you don't really. It's kind of a moot point at this point. I think if the data we had out there, and if people started to really set cars up around the coilover shock data sheet, then it would become more relevant. But right now we separate springs from shocks, and the other thing I will say, with a crank style dyno such as we have here, it doesn't simulate the exact movement you're going to see within a car. A car doesn't make the wrap up or the movement of a shock. It's not necessarily in a linear rate, where when you have a crank, it's no different than a crank and an engine. It's going to have piston speed, it's going to speed up. It's going to get to top dead center. It's going to slow down to get to top dead center, and then it's going to reverse motion. That's the same thing that happens with a shock dyno. We gain that data off that. That's not necessarily what's happening on a race car. It's the way with the current state of how we build dynos and basically how we test shocks and everything we've gathered over the years. That's just how we gather the data. But the spring, so the two don't necessarily gathering data at that rate, and isn't, I guess, our priority at this point.
Got it. No, I understand. What about, and I see that Aaron has got something to show us. I do want to mention the RFX wireless load sticks that you guys have got going on. That's something very important. And I guess that's what it is. Aaron, remember your audio issue. You guys may have to swap positions, but what we got?
We are the first wireless load stick on the market. The nice thing about this is that you can go from using 1 to 2 to 4. And I'll have Carter kind of explain the benefits to that. He's the expert in that area, but came out with these. Obviously, we had no shows last year. We did talk about it a little bit on the EPARTRADE broadcast previously, but these things we're beginning to sell them. They're on the market. They're ready to go. Very, very handy. They all go to the same kind of an indicator that we have with our scale systems that are known by all kinds of racers. That's kind of our bread and butter product. Very similar technology, only we're, simulating and putting it in the location of the shock. And I'll let Carter talk a little bit more. I know we're getting close to the end here, so.
Excellent. And thank you guys so much for working with us. Just so you know, your website up in the chat section. Everybody, if you want to get these guys, both of their websites, esssuspension.com and Intercomp Racing are both in the chat section. Click on them, check out the website, bookmark the website so you can go back and get a hold of both Carter and Aaron. Carter, you were going to say.
Yeah, just to give a quick overview of the load sticks and kind of how they work and what the basic point of them is what we found with our scaling systems is we're looking at load rates at the tire and actual physical weights. That's what scales are for. We try to tie in, and basically the racing market has called for tying in and figuring out what the actual physical spring load is on the race car at that point. So what you have here is basically this sits in the place of the shock. This is going to sit in the place of the shock, and instead of having the shock on there, take that out. You put this load stick in there, and you elevate the car, and the weight of the spring and the load that it would actually see at the shock, it's pushing down, and it pulls on this S-beam load cell, and it will take that, and it's going to generate a weight over on, just like our scales would, same load cells that we use, or same concept we would use, and it is going to take and it is going to generate a measurement, and it's going to tell us how much load we have on that spring, so we can take in cases where we have adjustment with the in that area, we can take in the case of most of our vehicles, we have a weight jack where we can put more load into the spring or not, and we can then tune the vehicle. And once again, getting that data and getting parameters and saying, oh, my car worked very good like this, and logging that, getting that down and saying, all right, that's where it's at. And then you just have another, in some cases, we'll put this on just to check and make sure things are where they were before. And in some cases, we'll go on there, we're going to make a tuning adjustment. We say, we are going to take this and we're going to put more load or less load into that wheel. And that's really where a lot of the setup has gone. And we have, so we tie everything in. We still scale our vehicles, but we also want to know, but scaling doesn't necessarily tell us the spring load that's going to be on them. So that's what this unit is for. So it's become pretty popular.
Gentlemen, is there anything we haven't mentioned that you want the world to know out there before we part ways? And I think you mentioned you'll be at the PRI next week with a couple of these machines in your booth. Why don't you give your booth number as well? Not that, we need to go to a trade show anymore, thanks to Industry Week here on EPARTRADE, but many of us, Francis is down there laughing, but we want to swing by and say hi to you. So where are you going to be?
Yeah, so we'll be at PRI, and they go hand in hand. So we thank Francis for everything that he does and the work of people like you, Joe, mediating these things. I think it's great to have both. Carter will be in our booth, and he'll be running the dyno live. So if you want to see a dyno run or you have questions, please come to booth 1401. We have all that. Carter's also doing similar seminars in more depth. They're hour-long seminars in room 240 at PRI. So we appreciate everything you guys are doing. It's great. Like I said, I think they go hand in hand. Francis knows that. We talk about it. So Judy, thanks for your help. We appreciate it. Sorry about our audio issue. Obviously, it's on our end, but
really strange. I mean, it's just like we never experienced that before. You know, it's
We're
just,
not in our normal studio because our stuff is shipping to PRI right now. So,
well,
sorry.
we'll
But
see.
yeah, I believe the audio is maybe on one side here and it's on this
That-
one. So
Maybe
we
that's what
appreciate
it is.
everything. Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions?
No, I mean, I said thank you very much, and we pushed Intercomp's products back on the homepage of EPARTRADE as well. I'll see you next week as well, Aaron and Carter, and thank you for your support. And you know, this technical issue, I was just that was something we never experienced before, and what a coincidence with the.
It's a new world.
No, listen, here's what it is. Here's what it is, guys. It's no big deal. Don't feel bad about it at all. You're using a laptop for your microphone, which is what you're looking at me on right now, but the camera is plugged in via a USB cord and it's over there. Like, look at the camera, guys. Wave to us in the camera. Yeah, that's the deal. And the tiny little microphone hole is in the side of the laptop that's probably on the other side, and it's just giving us a little problem. No worries, though. You did a great job dealing with it.
Yeah.
Importantly.
Oh well.
And people got the word.
Learn something every day. The answer to the last question is, I think, yes, on the 8 horsepower dyno. And again,
Yes.
visit us at intercompracing.com or esssuspension.com. So
Well, Joe
Excellent.
is the host.
Thank you.
He's now a technical computer expert as well. So thank you for for the insight. That was a really good one.
The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
There are two types of people, racers and everyone else. Racer Magazine is for those who believe that racing is a way of life. Racer embodies the excellence that defines a sport driven by passion, courage, and ingenuity. Get 1 year of both Racer's print and digital edition for only $39 with instant access to our entire digital issue archive. Subscribe now at info.racer.com.